Hello class. Well, I'm very excited about this next project that you're going to do, and it's going to be a lino cut. And a lino cut is, lino is short for linoleum. A lino cut is basically the modern equivalent of a wood cut, for instance, as was popular during the Renaissance. The only difference being the medium. Instead of using a very smooth piece of wood, we're using a piece of linoleum, and the advantage to linoleum is that it's much cheaper than a fine wood block, and it's much easier to carve since it's softer. So those are all things that are going to work towards our advantage. The basic concept of a wood block, or of a linoleum print and of a wood block print, is that you carve away all of the material that you want to be white on your final print, and whatever is left will receive the ink and will make the print. Now you can find different kinds of linoleum. It's usually gray or brown or tan, and you can find them mounted on a plywood block like this, which is helpful because it keeps it nice and flat, or you can find them unmounted in sheets. And the unmounted pieces of linoleum are cheaper, but if you don't have a printing press, they're a little bit more difficult to get prints out of because they don't lay flat. So you have to use a lot of pressure on them and roll them to make a good print. So what I didn't realize when I recommended the lino cut kit to you is that the wood block, or the lino block that is included with that kit, is only 4 by 5 inches. Which means that it's even smaller than this one. This one is 5 by 7. And you're going to find that with lino cuts, if you have any kind of detail, which mine is definitely going to have, it gets harder and harder the smaller you get. So, I mean, a great big one like this would be much easier to carve. This is one I did in graduate school, and this was a multi-stage or a multi-color lino cut where you would make multiple prints of each color, and then you'd carve away some more and print the other colors one at a time. So at the end, once you print all of your different prints, you'd have 2 or 3 or 4 colors. But we're just going to do a one color print to keep it simple. And the subject matter is completely up to you this time. I'm not going to be as picky about that. But I'll basically show you how it works. Here's another lino cut that I did for a class demo a few years ago. And it's very simple. I just did a simple drawing directly on the linoleum, and this one is a sheet. As you can see, it's not mounted, and these are the prints that I made off of it. You can see that they have a nice kind of a textural quality to them. You know, there's little bits and pieces that where some of the high points also caused some ink to get onto the paper, and that's fine. That's kind of the way that lino cuts look, or woodblock prints as well. So that's kind of expected, and unless you're really a perfectionist, you can leave those and it's just fine. So these are actually pretty decent prints for just having a sheet of linoleum. And as you can see, however you carve it onto the linoleum, of course it's going to print backwards. So just make sure that you're aware of that before you get started. So the first thing that you're going to need, as far as your tools, you're going to absolutely need linoleum, obviously. You're going to need a linoleum cutter, and this is the one that was included in the kit, but you don't have to get the kit, but I think the kit does save you a little bit of money unless you end up buying the linoleum blocks separately. But so I've got some different sizes and shapes of cutters, which is going to be helpful depending on whether you're doing some fine detail or you're just trying to remove a lot of material at a time. And it's nice that these stay in the handle so that you don't lose them. So you need a cutter, you'll need some water-based block printing or lino printing ink, and these are Speedball brand, but any brand will work. A dark color, you can pick any color to make your print really. Dark colors are probably going to work better for you. This is a pewter. I also have black, and I have a few other colors, but I think I'm just going to use pewter for this one. And you need a brayer. A brayer is basically just a rubber roller, excuse me, and this is for applying your ink. Things that you don't have to buy but that you probably have around home are like a styrofoam plate or something for rolling in your ink. There's one that's included with the block printing kit, but you don't need that. There's different styles of brayers and stuff too, and I don't really have a preference, so use whatever is most economical. So in order to get started, the first thing that you need is a drawing. And I made a drawing of St. Michael. And so I'm going to take this drawing and transfer it to my lino block. So what I did was I just laid it on the paper and traced around it so that I knew what size it was going to be. And now I'm going to transfer it. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can either freehand it onto your block print. If you want to reverse it so that it ends up facing the same direction as you drew it, you're going to need to probably use some kind of tracing paper that you can then flip over and transfer onto your block print. The simplest way to transfer it, if you're not worried about it being backwards, is to take either a piece of charcoal or just a dark pencil and color the entire back of your drawing with graphite or with charcoal. And then when you lay it on your block and line it up, you should probably tape it or fix it there somehow so that it doesn't move. And then when you follow over your lines, again, with pen, you probably want to use a different colored pen. That'll transfer the graphite or the charcoal onto your linoleum block. So let's go ahead and transfer our drawings onto the block, and then we'll continue on. Okay, so as it turns out, if you do a pencil drawing, you may not even have to color on the back. What I did was I drew some dark black dots on the corner of my drawing to register it to the linoleum block. I flipped it over. I kind of folded the edges over to make sure that the paper stayed registered. And then I just took the edge of a baby food jar lid and I scraped it really hard over the back of the drawing, and that transferred it to the linoleum block. And so it made enough of an impression that I can see my drawing and I can continue on from here. Now, before I start carving with the lino cutter, what I'm going to do is take a Sharpie and I'm going to redraw my drawing, and I'm gonna make sure I make nice thick lines, because what I'm going to do is try to carve away all of the gray area and leave the black on so that I know exactly what it'll look like when it prints. Some people like to color the whole surface of it with black so that they can see a black mark anywhere that the linoleum is still too high. But that makes it a little bit harder to have a detailed drawing also on the surface. So I'm going to do it this way and just darken all of my lines and decide which areas I want to leave black. And then when that's done, I'll be ready to start cutting. Okay, so now I have my drawing mostly inked onto my linoleum block. I say mostly because there are some areas that I didn't color in completely just because I don't want to use up my entire marker. And I might be experimenting with a little bit of hatching. It just depends on how detailed I want to get and how much time I want to take on this. I generally try to do a good enough job on these demo projects that I could legitimately use it for artwork and sell it. And you certainly can too, either with this project or in the future. The great thing about block prints is that you can make multiples of them, and every print that you make from your original block print is considered an original. So it's a very efficient way to produce artwork, and that's why it was invented in the first place. So you can see I've kind of marked out some hatching. I made sure to keep the hatch marks pretty large though, because I have to carve around all of these black areas. So some of these hatch marks I might end up just cutting off, just because they're gonna get too nitpicky. But that's okay. I mean, you can always, just because it's in ink now doesn't mean it's completely permanent. You can always carve things off that you drew on. The only thing you can't do is put material back once you've carved it off. Your cutting tool, as I said before, is equipped with various different blades. And even if you have only 2 or 3 different blades, you can make do with them. So what I have, and I'm not entirely sure if it's the same blades that you have, I have one wide kind of U-shaped tool, and this tool is really good for just removing lots of material in your big open spaces. So that one you're gonna not want to do any details. On the other end of the spectrum, there's one with a very tiny little V groove at the end, and this is for doing the smallest details. Then you have 2 different V tips that are kind of medium size. One is a little bit more U-shaped, that's this one, and this one is a little bit more V-shaped, so it has a little bit of a sharper edge to it. And the last thing I have is just kind of a flat knife blade, and I've never found this to be super useful. I'm not sure if it's just for carving really tiny details or oddly shaped details. I'm not sure, but you have this leaf shaped knife in there too, and you never know, it might come in handy. Someone must use it, or else they wouldn't include it. Now, when you start carving on your lino cut, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert the largest curve tool. So this cutter has a screw on it that you need to loosen in order to insert the tip. And there's only a certain side that it will go in. So then once you've got your blade in, screw the handle back on the bottom. You're going to want this because you'll be wanting to push with your palm on the tool. So when your cutting tool is assembled, basically it's not real complicated, but I do want to tell you that you don't need to cut real deep. First of all, when you do cut really deep, you're just wasting material, and you're dulling your blade for no reason. The most important thing I can tell you about using your cutting tool is don't ever cut towards your hand. You're going to be really tempted to, and before you know it, you'll stop thinking about it, you'll be working on it, you'll be cutting towards your hand, and it'll slip and it'll go straight into your finger. It doesn't matter how many times I warn people about it when I have students in class and I do a lino cut project. It doesn't matter how many times you warn people, someone will just forget and not realize what they're doing, and before they know it, there's a bloodbath. So these tools are very sharp, so be aware of that. And even if they aren't very sharp, sometimes you can hurt yourself even worse, because if they're dull, then you just try to push harder and force it, and that can end up causing a slip and a bloody accident. So be very, very careful with these tools. It might be best to do it in the presence of your parents or a sibling or somebody who can just watch over the shoulder and make sure you're not cutting towards yourself, because sometimes you're a very bad judge of your own absent-minded stupidity sometimes. So have your brother or sister watch you and smack you if you start cutting towards your hand. One more thing that I should tell you is it's probably a good idea to start by outlining your outlines, if that makes sense. So start by going around the main containing lines, the main contour lines of your drawing. And be very careful not to cut off the line, just you want to leave the line on. So that you have enough of a line on your final print. And as you can see, I'm always working away from my body. So when I need to start working towards me, that means I have to turn the block and work in a different direction, so that I'm always working away from my body. And as long as your cuts are nice and shallow, you'll find that it's pretty easy to turn the blade as you're cutting. So you have to just be patient with it and give it some time. And like I said, this is going to take probably a day or two to cut out all of the gray area. So allow yourself plenty of time. Don't rush it. Don't be surprised if your hand gets fatigued or if your palm gets sore. You might need to just take a break from it for a while and then come back to it later. Okay, so I think that I have my lino cut all finished and ready to try to ink and print. Now, just because we ink it and print it doesn't mean that it has to be finished. If we don't like the way the print looks, the great thing about this is that we can just wash the ink off of it and carve away some more if we think it needs some work. So what I'm going to do now is show you how we apply the ink to the block. I'm going to use pewter, so it's kind of a dark metallic gray color, and not sure how much we'll need, but we'll try that for now. If you have a styrofoam plate, that will probably work a little bit better because this might absorb some of the moisture, and I'm not sure how well that'll work, but we'll try it. So I'm going to roll the ink both directions, try and get an even coat on your brayer. I've got it on there pretty thick. Don't necessarily want it thick, but it's not coming off. So now we're going to apply it to the block. And when I was carving my block, I deliberately left a little bit of the lino cut left around the edges to hopefully help when I'm applying my ink. And because it was on the brayer a little bit thick, I might not get a good print this first time. We'll have to see. You can always try it again. Okay, so I have my block evenly coated, and it looks a little bit gloppy in some of the cracks there, but we'll clean it up later if that doesn't work for us. Okay, so I'm gonna try it putting the block face down first. If that doesn't give us a good result, then we can always try laying the paper on top of the block. Okay, so we've got a partial print. So we'll try it laying the paper on top of the block and see if that gets us a better result. Alright, now let's see our result. Okay, that gave us a much better print. We can still reapply ink and try it again and see if we can get better results, but that would certainly be good enough to submit for your assignment. Okay, so on my first attempt at printing, I got a little bit much ink on, I think, because it started to pool up in the cracks, and so that gave me kind of a blotchy print. So the key to not getting a blotchy print is to have little enough ink on it from the very beginning that you don't get it in the grooves of your lino cut. So I have very little ink on here. It's not making peaks, so that's a good way to know that you don't have too much ink on your plate or on your brayer. So I washed the ink off from the first attempt, and so now I'm going to reapply. So it might take several passes to get ink all over your lino cut, but you'll be better off if you go less rather than more. Okay, so we ended up with what looks to be a nice clean print, although in the sense that it's not blotchy, all of our lines and details are quite visible, but we could use more coverage as far as paint goes, as far as the ink goes. So the thing with block printing is that sometimes it takes several tries to get it perfect, and like I said, every one is considered an original, so it's good practice to go ahead and make a dozen or even 2 dozen, And then you keep the best ones, and those are the ones that you would sell as original block prints. It looks like I finally got a print that I'm happy with. This is print number 5. So I definitely want to make more of these, but at this point, when I get a print that is of the quality that I like, I can go in and look and see if there's some of these high points that I want to remove from the lino cut so that they don't show up in the print. I can certainly do that. But like I said, it's not really expected to have a perfectly clean print. This is kind of the look of a lino cut or of a woodblock cut. So if you're happy with it like this, then I'm happy with it like this. So this could certainly be your submission. Just go ahead and scan it and or photograph it and upload it to the submission forum. I can't wait to see your work.